Election Day is less than 1 week away, and both Vice President Harris and former President Trump are stepping up their outreach to Black men. The key voting bloc has become increasingly disillusioned with the Democratic Party, but that doesn't mean they've been flocking to the polls to vote for Republicans. I'm Cheyanne M, race and politics reporter for The Hill, and this is The Switch Up. On today's episode, we're delving into the impact Black male voters could have on what has been called the most consequential election in modern times. What are their top concerns? What are the campaigns doing to reach them? Is it working? And perhaps most importantly, will they show up on November 5th?
I think it's very important to not operate from the assumption that Black men are in anybody's pocket. Black men are like any other voting group. You got to earn their vote. So I'm working to earn the vote, not assuming I'm going to have it because I am Black.
That was Vice President Harris earlier this fall during a conversation with the National Association of Black Journalists. Despite being the first Black female to be nominated by a major political party for office of the President of the United States, Harris has been struggling to win over Black male voters. Depending on who you ask, like former President Obama, it comes down to one thing: sexism.
We have not yet seen the same kinds of energy and turnout in all quarters of our neighborhoods and communities as we saw when I was running. Now, I also want to say that that seems to be more pronounced with the brothers. So if you don't mind, just for a second, I'm going to speak to y'all directly. I've got a problem with that because part of it makes me think, and I'm speaking to men directly now, part of it makes me think that, well, you just aren't feeling the idea of having a woman as president. And you're coming up with other alternatives and other reasons for that.
While Obama received backlash for his comments, with some arguing the remarks were unfair and don't accurately reflect how Black men feel, some surveys seem to support his assertion, particularly among younger voters. The University of Chicago's latest Gen Forward poll found that though 26% of Black men ages 18 to 40 said they would vote for former President Trump if the election were held today, they also said Harris was the best candidate to solve some of the nation's most pressing issues. Nearly half of the Black men in the survey said the Democratic nominee is the candidate most capable of being a strong leader. Another 52% said Harris would do the most to improve the lives of them and their families. But Quentin Jordan, vice president of the Black Conservative Federation, said the generational gap may be linked to social media.
I think the largest factor that plays into the generational differences is information, right? Older generations aren't on social media as much as younger generations, so we're able to see both candidates much more, right? So Donald Trump, he's out here doing podcasts left and right, so we're able to hear what his actual stances are, and people are asking him challenging questions. If he's able to support that with things that we agree with, then that's where we lean. Older generations are typically going to be focused more so on the news cycle, which can be swayed one way or the other. And I think that that level of information and how quickly you're getting it or where you're getting it from is going to play a difference, right? And so when you talk about younger male voters, we're typically not watching your major media outlets like a Fox News or a CNN. We're typically going to, log on to Twitter and see, hey, what did this candidate do yesterday? Okay, where can I go and watch this full form podcast? And we're tuning into that more so than the traditional media. And I think that's the biggest difference between the generations. I don't necessarily believe that it's an ideological difference. Again, I think most Black people are raised on conservative principles. We typically do everything in a conservative fashion except vote. But I think that is starting to change with the younger generations, just given the visibility and accessibility of information that's out there.
That's not to say Harris hasn't been stepping up her outreach to Black men. Earlier this month, she announced her opportunity agenda for Black men, which includes providing 1 million small business loans worth up to $20,000 in forgiveness, training and mentorship programs to help open the door to high-demand industries, and an initiative focused on addressing health issues disproportionately impacting Black men. She also vowed to legalize marijuana and ensure that Black men benefit from its business potential the same way their white counterparts have been for years. The vice president also sat down with Charlemagne the God twice and appeared on The Shade Room. She also spoke with Roland Martin. Still, while Black men are fairly consistent in voting for Democrats, Harris's falling support among the demographic isn't entirely surprising. Democrats have been hemorrhaging Black male voter support since 2012, when Obama was reelected. But the reason behind the slipping enthusiasm is because neither party really spends time speaking directly to Black men, according to Mondale Robinson, founder of the Black Male Voter Project.
Honestly, both campaigns are doing a horrible job at reaching Black men. The efforts have been haphazard at best, and we're witnessing an election cycle like we've never seen. A candidate switch at the last minute. Then that candidate raised north of $1 billion in less than 3 months, or right around 3 months. And then traditional tactics still being deployed in a way that does nothing to increase the number of Black men participating, meaning majority of this money is being spent with the same consultants who have failed epically at reaching Black men, and most of it being spent on TV ads, a place that is the least effective way to engage, especially when you're trying to expand your base and bring in people who don't trust politicians.
Advocates like Democratic strategist Antoine Seawright add, part of the reason Black men don't want to participate in the political system is because they're not listened to. Instead, Antoine said, most candidates talk to Black men about one thing: criminal justice reform.
Black men care about more than just criminal justice reform in the criminal justice system. Somehow or another, we get pegged with that as if we're a one-legged stool or one-trick ponies. We only care about criminal justice. That's bullshit. The fact of the matter is we care about an economic bill of health. We care about healthcare. We care about education. We care about an environment that that's cleaner and greener and better than we found it. We care about all the things that every other constituency care about. The unfortunate part, there's some in this country, the right-wing extremists who've hijacked the Republican Party, who try to put us in a box and think we only care about issues like criminal justice. When the fact of the matter is, I want the same things that white men want. I want the same benefits that white women have. I want to have the same access to opportunity that Hispanics and every other constituency have. And that's what this election is all about.
Black men, like many voters of all races and ethnic backgrounds, have consistently identified the economy as their top concern heading into November. And by economy, they mean the cost of living, not necessarily what's happening on Wall Street. But healthcare, racial and ethnic equality, addressing violent crime and gun policy are all part of their priorities heading to the ballot box, according to September polling by Pew Research Center. And these issues aren't that far off from what advocates like Quentin from the Black Conservative Federation have been hearing on the ground.
The top 3 issues that I'm hearing, regardless of where I go across the country, are number one, inflation. I think that has impacted every American, but specifically Black Americans, especially when you think about where we fit into the financial picture of America. So it's causing a real burden on families. The second issue that I'm hearing is, surprisingly, the migrant crisis. Not so much that we're against having migrants come into America, but it's more so, hey, we're seeing migrants come into America, often cases illegally, and they're getting resources that the Black community has been fighting for, in some cases begging for decades. And that's not sitting well with people, especially in cities like Chicago and places like New York, where the government is spending billions of dollars on the migrant crisis. They're opening up schools that were previously closed down in order to shelter the migrants. And, Black voters are saying, hey, something is off here. And I would say that the third thing is crime. I know that there's been a lot of talk on whether or not crime has come down nationally, but if you go into these communities, people don't feel that. Right, we're talking a difference of, we had 21,000 murders last year, and now we're at 20,000. Right, it's still an extremely high number, and people feel that every day. And you have a spike in different crimes, such as car thefts, which has been trending for the last couple of years, and it's at record highs. And so those are the top 3 issues that I'm hearing. And I think, again, Donald Trump has been the candidate who's been more vocal on providing a solution for those. The Democrat Party just doesn't seem to have an answer.
But even if the candidates were to speak on these issues, which they have to an extent, there's one thing keeping Black men from leaning into their messages: trust.
Unfortunately for politicians like Kamala Harris, the vice president, and the Democratic candidate for president, it is not that easy, right? You could be right on the issues, but if you're not a trusted messenger, it's not going to work with this demographic, because this demographic have seen them be victims of politicians and the political system in a way that no other demographic in America can explain, right? We know about how much, like I just said, Black men are killed by cops, and those actors. We know that Black men have the shortest lives of anybody. We have the worst healthcare outcome. We're the only demographic in this country that can be born rich and still are likely to, or middle class and still are likely to experience poverty in our lives. That is not excluding anybody, including Black women, right? That's a demographic factor that is only about being Black man in this country. So I think, being right on the issues is one thing that you have to do, but that's not enough. You have to be a trusted messenger. And it is impossible for a politician who is introducing themselves for the first time to this demographically across the country to be seen as a trusted messenger. So the right thing to do would be to ensure that organizations that these Black men do trust have all the resources they need to do exactly what needs to be done to reach them and get them out to vote. And that's where I think the deficit is with the Democrats.
Without those trusted messengers, Democrats face an uphill battle in recruiting the crucial voting bloc. But that doesn't mean they're going to hit the polls for Trump either, says Mondale.
Donald Trump said he's going to get 25% of Black men vote. And then the world started talking like it was a real possibility, right? Like since Donald Trump came on the scene, Black men have become more progressive. In 2020, he got less of the Black men vote than he did in 2016. In 2022, we saw Black men show up for progressive ideas and candidates in a way that they had never before. In 2023, even when it wasn't a national election, we saw Black men in Ohio outperform every demographic for women's right to choose, including Black women. 8% higher. Black men voted 88% for women's right to choose. Black women was the closest demographic at 80%. No national media or anybody ran with that story or told that story, because the myth of this Black man seepage towards Republican or becoming more conservative is something that I think people wanted to be the narrative. But in actuality, we don't have voting data to support that. Talking to me about polls mean nothing, because in 2020, they said the same thing. Donald Trump was going to get 20% of the Black men vote. And what happened, we were screaming, Black Male Voter Project was screaming the entire year, this is fanciful at best. And then disrespectful to Black men at worst. And I think we're in the same space right now as it pertains to if older men or younger Black men are becoming more conservative, even though our actions and our voting history show something completely different. People don't want to have a real grown-up conversation about our politics, and they want to just point to people like rappers who don't represent Black men. Ice Cube, Lil Wayne, who on record saying America's not racist because he was a young, rich N-word. Saying that Black Lives Matter as an organization didn't matter, when we seen those three sisters who started it or give so much to the fight. So I don't believe, and I'm not bothered by the 8 to 12% of Black men that will vote Republican, because since the shift in party policy, we've always seen that demographic, and it's a small fraction of what we need to do, because there's so many brothers out there that would vote for progressive ideas and candidates if we were able to convince them to get off the couch and go vote. The problem, though, is, like, again, because there's a lack of trust in the political infrastructure and candidates to do what they say they're going to do on behalf of Black men, we see brothers really choosing between the couch or the candidate, not between Republicans and Democrats.
And that's what many advocates like Antoine have been trying to remind Black men. Their vote is their voice, and their voice has power, especially for Democrats.
Well, Black voters are the most consequential, dedicated, and loyal voting bloc in the history of this country. Election after election, we've proven that. And with Black men, you can win with us, but you can damn sure lose without us. And we've seen that. In 2016, we had 13% of Black men vote against the most qualified person to ever run for the office and vote for the most unqualified person to ever think about the office. And we lost that election. And not only did we lose that election, we lost generations of progress, because the former president was able to put three extremists on the nation's highest court, 200 plus individuals on the lower courts and really give a license to extremism, racism, bigotry, hate, white nationalism, and Christian white nationalism in this country, and empower those individuals in such a way that our parents and grandparents will probably tremble in their grave if they knew what we were having to face. And so when I fast forward the tape and I think about the importance of this election, I will look you in your face virtually and tell you that Black men are casting a generational vote. But it's going to be critical that we as Democrats and the vice president and all of us who are ambassadors for the cause earn the trust of Black men and then earn the votes. Because in our community, our votes are clearly a demonstration of our trust. There's no doubt in my mind she is far better than the former president on everything in this race, including the issues that directly impact Black men.
But one thing advocates consistently find is that Black men aren't certain whether voting has gotten them anything.
And I don't claim as if I speak for all Black men, but I do speak to them, a lot of them, and I have for a very long time, doing my little Black job. And what I would tell you is that you hear different things from different people. But the one consistent thing I think I hear is, I'm not sure what my vote has gotten me. I'm not sure I'm valued. And that's why my party has to spend this election and every other election reminding folks of their value, their network, and their net worth. I think my party has to spend time, if we want to continue to win elections in this country, differentiating the policy differences and pointing out the extremism that comes from the other side. And I don't mean in the Washington, D.C. K Street terms. I mean in the terms that we speak about on my street, because elections are won on my street. Strategy and bojangling happens on K Street. And that's where we have to find the disconnect and pull together the two of them to make certain we're meeting folks where they are with a simplified message that makes sense. I live by this, Cheyanne. Every time I show up anywhere, I don't care what the audience is, it's always based off KISS. Keep it simple, see right. Because Black men in particular, or just human beings, we run away from what we don't understand or what we fear. And so it's easier to be angry than it is informed. It's easier to vote against something than it is to be for something. We've got to give Black men a reason to vote for Kamala Harris. And in that, they will vote against Donald Trump, J.D. Vance, and their Project 2025.
Still, Quentin added that this is the first year it feels like Black voters, and Black men in particular, are being prioritized. From both candidates working to meet the group where they are, to leaning into surrogates, including other political leaders and celebrities, the final weeks leading up to November 5th have seen a push for Black male voter support that seems unprecedented compared to other elections.
This is really the first election where both parties have had to fight for the Black vote. In previous elections, the Black vote pretty much always went to the Democratic Party in large numbers. We're talking upwards of 90%. Now you have a Republican candidate in Donald Trump who's talking to the issues of the Black community, specifically Black men, Black fathers, and Black parents in general. So we don't want to leave out the mothers there. But his message is resonating because he's talking about issues that families talk about at the dinner table, that men talk about in the barbershops, and quite frankly, is resonating with people.
Still, as Election Day inches closer, advocates on both sides of the aisle are emphasizing that this year's election is one of, if not the, most important contest of our lifetime.
You know, I've been guilty of traveling this country throughout my career of saying this is the most important election of our lifetime. I've said that cycle after cycle. And it's been the biggest lie I've ever told, because every election is important. But this election by far is the most consequential of our lifetime, because the consequences of this election perhaps will linger for the next 50 to 60 to even 100 years. And I keep saying this every time I'm traveling across the country. Black folks are casting a survival vote in this election, because whomever has policy decision-making power after November 5th will have a large say-so in whether or not communities that look like mine or the ones I grew up in live or die, not just survive or thrive, but literally live or die.
Antoine isn't the only one who has been emphasizing the stakes in this year's election, especially for Black Americans. Congressman Jim Clyburn, one of the most powerful voices on Capitol Hill, is urging Black voters, especially young ones, to really consider who they'll vote for next week.
I've been saying to young people, cast a selfish vote. Be selfish with this vote. Think about yourself, the future you want for yourself, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. And which candidate is offering you an opportunity to get to your goals, your dreams, your aspirations. That is what's on the ballot.
I'm Cheyanne Daniels, race and politics reporter for The Hill. And from all of us at The Hill, thanks for listening to this episode of The Switch Up. Tune in next time as we delve into the role of Black women in this year's election. We also gave you a sneak peek at our interview with Representative Jim Clyburn, which will air in its entirety on November 4th, one day before Election Day. The Switch Up was written and created by me. Our editor is Steph Thomas. Our booking producer is Julianne Ventura, and our senior content producer is Rima Rahman.